Today's recipe is super easy to make. It sounds really fancy, it looks really fancy, and it's delicious. It's called rouladen. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today's recipe, it sounds real fancy, but it's not. Basic ingredients, an easy technique, and it all starts with beef, pickles, and bacon. I mean, what could go wrong with beef, pickles, and bacon? Not much, okay? So the best way to get the rouladen rolls rolled up is an assembly line. So this is how I do it. Now feel free to change it up any which way you want, but this is how I do it and it works seamlessly and it makes it really easy. First thing we need to do is get our pot preheated. Now whatever type of pot you're using, it doesn't matter. You're gonna use sear saute on high. If you're on a stove and you're doing this in a frying pan, you're gonna turn your heat on medium high probably, okay? We're gonna go high sear saute on this. Then we're going to assemble our rolls, get them browned up, build the sauce, and then I'm gonna keep them in the Possible Cooker Pro to braise. And they braise in about an hour to an hour and a half. All right, so let's get started. We're gonna turn this on. All right, sear saute on high, and we're gonna hit start. While the pot is heating up, we're gonna start to assemble our beef rolls. For this recipe, I recommend getting either a top round or a bottom round that is cut about 1/4 of an inch thick. There is something called Malaise style, which is about 1/8 of an inch thickness. That is a little too thin for this recipe. So look for something a little bit thicker. And what I found was just bottom round, and it works great in this recipe. So put that down on your cutting board, and then we are going to season both sides with equal parts salt and pepper. So what I do is I put 1 tablespoon of sea salt and 1 tablespoon of pepper, mix it together, use what I need, and I just discard the rest, okay? So I'm gonna go right in with my fingers because I feel like you get a really good idea of how much salt and pepper you're using when you do it this way, and we just broadcast over the top for a very thin coating. Flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. This is the main seasoning in the dish. Of course, the bacon adds saltiness and flavor. The pickles add saltiness and flavor, but we don't add a lot of salt and pepper, and we don't add a lot of other seasonings to this. So make sure that you are seasoning the beef before you add the other things to it. Now, the next step that I like to do is put the mustard on. I use about 1 teaspoon of stone ground mustard, and I just spread it right over the top in a little thin layer like that. I have tried the recipe with Dijon mustard, and I honestly don't like it as much as I do the stone ground. The brand that you use is up to you, but this happens to be a German brand that I was able to pick up at Walmart, and I love the flavor. It works great in this dish. After you put the mustard on, we're gonna take 1 slice of thick cut bacon. Can you use thin sliced bacon? Yes, but I find this to be a little bit better in this dish. It holds up under the braising or slow cooking or pressure cooking process because you can do it in any kind of appliance, really. We're gonna lay that down. It's gonna extend over top. It does not matter, okay? Don't worry about that. Then on top of that, we are going to put a pickle. The pickle is very important, and I like to get the stackers because they are already sliced. They're about 1/4 of an inch, and it works great. Now, traditionally, I believe that they use skinless pickles. I can't find skinless pickles, and I'm not gonna go through and cut the skin off. I have not found it to create an issue with this dish, so just plop your pickle right on, whether or not you're gonna slice them yourself or buy the pre-sliced stackers. Then I like to add, and this is totally optional, I like to add just a little bit of onion inside the roll. We also will use the rest of the onion in the dish. And now we're gonna roll it up. One thing I didn't point out is there's a tapered end usually and a wider end. Keep the tapered end of the beef towards you. It's gonna make it a little bit easier to roll. Put this flap up. See, now it's gonna keep those onions right in place. And then take your beef and start to roll. As you're rolling, it wants to push the ingredients forward. The way to get around that is to pull it back towards you, lift, roll, lift, roll, lift, roll. And then you can bring, if you want the bacon all inside, we could do the same thing on this side here too, which I don't care either way. I've done it both ways and it's fine. Now look, we've got this beautiful beef roll. Now to secure it, you could use toothpicks, but when we go to sear them with toothpicks, it gets a little cumbersome. So I recommend having cooking twine, and I cut them in I don't know, it's probably about 6-inch length. And we just secure both ends. So you need 16 pieces of cooking twine, and just take them up and just tie a knot. Now it is time to add the oil. I believe we're almost done preheating. And as I assemble, move these to the side, the oil will get hot and then we'll start to brown them up. So you can do 2 things at once, or you could do all of the beef rolls at once and then sear them all. It doesn't matter, okay? For the oil, you want to use olive oil, or you could use avocado oil, it doesn't really matter. You want a nice thin coating on the bottom of your pot or pan, whatever you're searing in. So I used about 2 tablespoons for this size pot. You may find that you need a little bit more or a little bit less, okay? We're gonna let that heat up and I'm just gonna keep on going. Okay, so the oil has heated up. I've got 3 of these beef rolls done. What I like to do before I put them into braise is just sort of snip off the excess. That's totally optional, but I just like to do it now before it gets covered with gravy. All right, so we'll do that and then get these in to start to sear while I make the rest of them. So what I do is just put them in. You can put them on either side. It makes no difference. Put them right into the oil there and leave them alone so that they sear for a good 3 to 5 minutes on that one side. Meanwhile, I'll make up the rest. We'll flip, we'll repeat the process, then we'll build our gravy. All right, so it's been about 4 minutes or so. And I just wanted to pick this up and show you how beautifully brown that is. That's how you want it to be for this dish. Now we are going to flip it over. And I'll do that with the ones that have been in the longest. And we'll keep going with rolling the rest of our beef. While the last few rolls finish browning, I'm gonna pull out the ones that have already been browned on both sides. And I have made this recipe a lot of times, and I have tried to keep beef rolls in the pot because it's one less step for you guys to do. But look, it is easier to take them out, build your gravy base in your roux, and then put them back in. Trust me on this one, it takes 2 seconds to pull them out. So get a clean tray and just set them down. And then we will wait for the rest to finish browning up and we'll make our gravy. All right, there we go. Now, our pot is super hot. If we added our butter right away, it might burn a little bit. So now I'm gonna get the rest of the onions in there. We're gonna put between 5 or 6 cloves of garlic. These are whole cloves, I don't mince them. And I just throw them right in. Now we don't want those to be in the pot too long. We don't want them to burn, we just want them to brown a little bit. Now we're gonna start to add our butter and our flour. So I have 4 tablespoons of salted butter. If you want to use unsalted, that's perfectly fine. You can adjust your salt at the end if you like. We're going to put that in. So the butter's going to melt, and then we are going to add in some flour. But before that, I'm going to add in tomato paste. I like to add the tomato paste now because it has a chance to sort of cook a little bit. And the more you cook tomatoes, the sweeter they become. So tomato paste is no different. So I like to get that in right now. And then we will move everything around with a spatula or wooden spoon would work fine. And we just need this to cook for about a minute or so. Oh my gosh, it already looks so good, right? Then we're gonna add flour. I have a little bit of salt and pepper left over, and I'm gonna put, this is just probably about a quarter teaspoon of salt, quarter teaspoon of pepper. That's from the pepper and salt that we made and used to coat the beef in. All right, so now we're gonna sprinkle your flour over. I have 4 tablespoons of flour here. This is gonna be kind of a thin roux because we have other fat from the beef in there as well. So we have a little bit more fat than flour in this ratio, and that's gonna be perfectly fine. If you were doing this on a pressure cooker, you could do it exactly the same way, and then take this out though. You don't want that in the pot when you pressure cook. So if you're gonna pressure cook it, take this part out. And I'll have directions in my written recipe on my website on how long to pressure cook if you wanna go that route. Now I'm using braise to finish this dish, but you could use slow cook. You slow cook on high, and I'll talk about that a little bit later because I want to talk to you about the temperature of the beef rolls because that is super important for texture. All right, let's get this combined and cooked about another minute. Then we're going to deglaze with some wine. I have a half of a cup of red Pinot Noir. You could use any red wine that's dry that you like. If you don't like wine or don't want to add it to your dish, just use an extra half of a cup of beef stock. And then you want to add 1.5 cups of beef stock. And that is our braising liquid. And it's also going to make our gravy. Now it's going to look a little bit thick. And probably you're going to say, oh, I need more gravy. Trust me, by the time these are done cooking, you are gonna have plenty of gravy, and the gravy should be on the thinner side. Now, I will give you some tips on thickening it at the end if you want to make it thicker, but traditionally it's a little bit on the thinner side of a gravy, and it's normally served with potato dumplings. But I've been testing that recipe out and I haven't gotten the texture perfect, so today I'm gonna serve it with good old mashed potatoes. All right, now let's switch over to braise. So we're gonna turn the Possible Cooker Pro off. Then we will turn it back on and we'll go over here to the braise function. The braise function does not have a temperature, so you don't have to worry about that. And we're gonna hit start. Now 6 hours, we do not need 6 hours of time, okay? So let me talk about the timing. These are gonna take about an hour to an hour and a half to finish cooking. However, it's very important that we go by temperature, and texture is the most important. So if you don't have a thermometer, after about an hour, cut a little piece off of one of the rolls, and if it is tender and delicious, it is done. If you have a thermometer and you want to go that way with it, you want your rolls to be over 200 degrees when you put a thermometer in there. Now, why is that? That is because we are taking the beef way past medium or well done. We're taking it to the, I call the tender shred phase, which is over 200 degrees. And this applies to all meats, guys, okay? So for this recipe though, over 200 degrees is where you want your target temp to be. So if you have a probe thermometer, you could actually put it right in there now, or you can just test it towards the end. So I'm gonna set the time for 90 minutes, but I will test it in 60 to see where we are. All right, now just a few extra little things. We're gonna put in a bay leaf, 1 or 2, it doesn't matter. And then what I like to do is put in some carrots. Totally optional, you don't have to do it. You could even dice them up if you didn't want them, kind of want them to disappear. I like to serve these as a side, okay? So along with my braised cabbage and my potato dumplings, when I perfect that, I will have a carrot to go along with it. And I just like to nestle these down right inside the gravy here. And the reason for the carrot is because it provides a little bit of sweetness to the gravy and it just balances everything beautifully, okay? But you can skip it if you want. All right, now we're gonna put the lid on. You always wanna braise with the lid. And one thing I wanna say is about this little hole here. That is there by design. It lets the steam out and it keeps the temperature regulated. So, and because steam will cool things down. So if steam builds up in the pot, the temperatures get higher. I've heard of people plugging this hole. Don't do it, at least not with this recipe, because you could end up scorching your gravy. And if you scorch your gravy, you're gonna taste it through your whole dish. And honestly, it's gonna taste ruined, okay? So don't plug the hole. It's extremely important because it is there for a reason. Now, we're gonna put the lid on and we're gonna put the hole towards the back. So whatever way that you're facing your appliance, put that hole towards the back so when you go to check on your food, you're not putting your face over the vent hole, which will have steam coming out of it and could burn you, okay? All right, so we'll check back in about an hour and I'll get the temperature. All right, it's been a little over an hour. Let's go ahead and give these babies a little temp here. Go right into the center. It's going up. Now it's getting close. It's 191. Now, you could stop and serve them now, okay? But in my experience, you want it to be over 200 degrees. So we have 10 more degrees to go, which means another 30 minutes of cooking. So 90 minutes is a good time. The other thing you can do is take a temp of your carrots. And you don't have to, don't worry about the temperature, but they should be over 200 degrees too. But are they tender enough? And mine could go a little longer. So because of those two reasons, I'm gonna keep on going and I'll see you in 30 minutes. All right, there we go. Now, when you plate up your rouladen, don't forget to take the string off because you don't want your guests to get a bite of string. Now I'm gonna add some of this glorious gravy, which I know you're gonna say, oh, that's too thin. This is the way it's supposed to be, but I'm gonna tell you in a minute how to thicken it. So let's pour this all over here. Oh my gosh, looks amazing. Then of course we need a carrot, which I'm just gonna stick my fork in here and get a little carrot. All right, there we go. Our rouladen is done. Now, if you wanted to thicken the sauce, take the rouladen beef rolls out, make a cornstarch slurry, add it in, bring it up to a boil, and you will thicken your sauce that way. It's much easier than having to like do a roux again. Now, if you have roux that you made previously and it's in the freezer, you can certainly add that in. But again, take your beef rolls out before you try to thicken the sauce or you will end up with a mess. Also, another thing is don't add a flour slurry if it's super hot gravy like it is right now, or you'll have clumps. So cool it down a little bit, then add in your flour slurry, because that's another way you can do it. Just mix up some flour and water and pour it in and bring it up to a boil. Okay, now, if I did this correctly, which I think I did, I will not even need a knife. So let's start with the carrot here, which I think they're perfect texture. They look beautiful. Absolutely perfect. Oh my gosh. 90 minutes, perfect timing. All right, now let's just go right in here and cut this with a fork. And it cut with a fork. That's perfect. All right, now I am gonna use a knife only because I don't want all of my filling to come out, but it does cut with a fork. It is super tender, which is what we want. And now we're gonna go for that perfect bite. One of the things that kind of made me think I'm not gonna like this dish is because of the bacon that goes in and then doesn't crisp up. I mean, obviously it's wrapped, it's rolled in the beef. It doesn't crisp up. So I thought that's gonna be so gross, but it's not. It actually, even though it's not crispy, it is fully cooked and it's not like flabby or fatty like I thought it was gonna be. So it's actually surprisingly delicious. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Oh my gosh, the flavors in this are so amazing. Simple ingredients, guys. Simple prep. Hands-off cooking. That's my kind of meal.